Welcome to Gambling with an Edge. And now, here are Bob and Richard.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Gambling with an Edge. I'm Bob Dancer.
And I'm Richard Munchkin.
Today our guest is a blackjack player who calls himself MPS. MPS, welcome to Gambling with an Edge.
Thanks for having me.
So, how did you get started in the AP game?
Yeah, I was in the Bahamas on a business trip just looking for somewhere to have dinner. And the place that I happened to find was in a casino. And I'm walking, and I was never a gambler. You know, I was raised conservatively. Gambling is bad, and it just never appealed to me because I don't like losing money. And my thought process was that's what gambling is. But here I am at this casino, you know, somewhere in the Caribbean, and I'm walking across the gaming floor, and I see this beautiful blonde at a blackjack table. And I had less than zero interest in the blackjack game, but I decided to sit down at the table and to shoot my shot. And so I sat there, and, you know, I had a little cash on me, and I bought in, and I had no idea what I was doing. I always took insurance. I had some terrible hits, some terrible stands as well. And, yeah, I just happened to get lucky, and I won $400. But actually, I didn't get lucky and ended up going to eat dinner by myself. And as I'm eating dinner, something that one of them said stuck with me. It was, you always have to do the same thing on 16 versus 10, but it doesn't matter if you hit or if you stand. And I remember thinking, well, that can't be right. Like, there has to be a correct way to play, and it can't be a factor of what you've been doing previously. And at the time, I didn't know it, but I was thinking that there has to be a basic strategy. And it piqued my curiosity a little bit, and I just started poking around online.
And did you pick up a book, or did you basically learn online?
I didn't pick up any books yet. It was mostly online. I found Blackjack Apprenticeship and a few other resources. And at the time, I was pretty busy with work, but, you know, every couple of weeks or now and again, I'd, you know, try to teach myself basic strategy, just really as a distraction, not taking it seriously or really caring that much at all.
So what happened to cause you to take it more seriously?
Yeah, so I had a major change in my life. I'd been self-employed for my entire adult life, and I had an opportunity to sell that business at a favorable time, and I took it. And I suddenly went from having all this free time, from being extremely busy, working, you know, 70-plus hours a week, to having massive amounts of free time. And I was applying for some jobs that had very lengthy hiring processes, so I had about a year. And I intended to take some time off and travel a little bit, but honestly, I got bored. And as I was traveling around Europe, I started listening to a few podcasts, this one included, and really started trying to teach myself basic strategy and to count, you know, just as something to do, really.
Okay. And what was...
But at some point you got to, I mean, when did the actual point happen where you were like, okay, now I'm going to learn, and I've learned, and now I'm going to go try to make money at this?
Yeah, so when I was kind of learning casually, I did start playing probably before I was ready, just micro stakes, red chipping, just trying to stay busy. And I eventually came back to the United States, and I started keeping records, and I was winning, and I started thinking about raising my stakes and said, hey, maybe this card counting thing can be a stopgap, you know, in between my last job and the one I'm going for. Maybe it can kind of keep me busy for the gap year, and I can travel and earn a little income on the side.
And so that's what you did?
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. I came back to the States and started playing. I had a little downswing, and I said, you know, if I'm going to actually start playing for real money, I should probably play it safe and have someone verify that I'm counting correctly, because just the edge is so thin. So I was a Blackjack Apprenticeship member at this time, and I reached out and I said, hey, is there somebody that can come and test me out just to verify that I'm playing correctly? And we went ahead and do that. I got some pointers. I was told that I had a winning game, but there was room to grow. And so I hit the books and I studied and worked to perfect my game. And next thing you know, I'm suddenly traveling and counting cards full time.
So you didn't actually go to a boot camp. Somebody came to you and tested you?
I went to a boot camp later, but there was no boot camp scheduled at this time. I actually went to somebody who was not too far from my area and paid him to test me and verify.
Huh. And so did you did that become like a relationship of some sorts in your blackjack career, the person who tested you? Or?
It has. Yeah, he has been mentoring me ever since to varying degrees, and it's building a network is the best thing that's happened to my career, and being able to meet him, and apparently he liked me when we met. He gave me the pointers, testing me out, and that's been a very productive and frankly profitable relationship since that happened.
So he tested you out, and now were you just constantly traveling on the road playing, or what was your approach like?
Yeah, I was mostly on the road traveling. You know, I'd play in one market until I couldn't play there anymore, and then it was on to the next one. I stayed mostly, you know, in my region of the United States. I didn't go cross country or anything, but I was on the road traveling full time. You know, for me, the travel aspect of advantage play is really a feature, not a bug. I enjoy, you know, traveling and seeing new places, meeting new people, and I don't mind living out of a bag. And the card counting thing was a way for me to earn money and satisfy my wanderlust at the same time.
But I'm guessing you didn't have a relationship at that point.
That is correct. The things had relatively recently ended, and so not only did I not have my job, which kept me very busy, but once she was out of the picture, I was completely free.
So you use blackjack traveling as a way to cruise for babes?
It's not exactly what I said, but you know, that's one maybe one possible interpretation. You know, it's funny though. I think back to the Bahamas, and if I hadn't seen that woman on the table, you know, would I have sat down? Would blackjack have piqued my curiosity? And you know, there's just no way to know that.
A butterfly flaps its wings in Beijing, right? So.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So you started betting bigger. At some point, you had to have a run of bad luck. What happened?
Yeah, that's right. The very first hour that I decided to raise my stakes to 2x500, I went and played somewhere, and I went down 5 figures. And I hadn't taken a 5-figure hit yet, but I remember thinking, you know, okay, that was bad, but the odds are that's not going to happen again. It was, you know, 10 or 11 grand. And I went out and played some more, and this time it took a couple hours, but I lost 5 figures again. And, you know, next thing I know, I've played for 15 hours and I've lost $40,000.
Yow. What was your bankroll at the point when this downswing happened?
I was sufficiently bankrolled, so this didn't put me anywhere near risk of ruin, but it almost ruined me emotionally because I couldn't divorce the concept of $40,000 from my previous employment and how much work it took to earn $40,000 or what you can buy with $40,000. And I played for hundreds of hours and frankly run relatively well, and I was making money, and I saw the other side of the variance coin, and it was not fun, not at all.
Yeah, well, this is a huge issue, right? I mean, some people get familiar with the having the adequate bankroll and being able to withstand downturns, you know, without going broke. But the other half of it, which is actually the other part of it, which is maybe more important, is the emotional side of those losing streaks. And I think cause a lot of people to quit.
Yeah, and I did quit temporarily, actually. I walked out of a casino when I hit the low point, and in the parking lot I called the guy who tested me out. He's a former guest on your show. And I said, hey, listen, I appreciate everything. You know, it's been a great run. I believe in the math. I believe that I'm playing correctly. But this sucks, man. It's not for me. And I retired for a grand total of 4 hours before I was back at the tables trying to work my way back up.
And how long did it take to get back that 40,000?
You know, I don't know off the top of my head. Not quite 100 hours, but I did get it back. But, you know, something that I wanted to say, just to follow up on your point on emotions, was that how helpful it was to be networked with other people in the community. Because my family and my civilian friends can't, I mean, maybe stock market losses, but they can't relate to taking that kind of a hit playing a game. And the general reaction is, hey, do you have a problem? You know, do we need to do something about this? But talking to other players who had counted, and they were familiar, they could relate, and they could give me good advice. And I think some of the best advice I got was from a player that your listeners on Blackjack Apprenticeship or the Discord will recognize by the handle Nichols. And he told me that, you know, just because you have the financial bankroll for something doesn't mean you have the emotional bankroll. And I thought the concept of emotional bankroll was just gold. And to this day, you know, I'm not really a variance junkie. I think of AP pretty conservatively. And part of that, it's pleasing myself because losing sucks and I don't handle it very well.
Yeah, and sometimes, for example, you said you had raised your bets to 2x500. Well, maybe that wasn't the level to be playing at that time. Even though your bankroll could handle it,
right.
You know, maybe you should have been playing at 2x300 or 2x400 or something.
Right.
Because I remember starting out, I remember when I first started betting green chips, that was a big deal, you know, and then when you start betting black, you get used to that, and then you start betting black chips, and that's a big deal, and you get used to it. So I think some people move up too quickly, or move how much they move up too quickly, just because, yeah, the emotional toll, you need to sort of get used to that level.
Yeah, I think that's right. And in my instance, I had a couple hundred hours of playing at 2x300, but I just ran well. So even though I had that time in, I hadn't really taken a big hit, even measured in terms of max bets, not dollars, at those stakes. And just the way the cards fell, literally my first hour, you know, raising those bets was, I just got obliterated.
You mentioned your family. Did they know what you were doing, and what did they think of it?
Skeptical. I've historically been pretty independent and beaten to my own drum. I had started a business when I was 20 years old, and, you know, they were skeptical of that, told me not to do it. That ended up going well, and I think that bought me some grace when I started doing this. Well, you know, the last harebrained idea he had went pretty well, so maybe this will go okay. But I absolutely, you know, I mentioned that I was losing, but I absolutely did not say, you know, hey, Dad, I just dumped 40 grand.
Yeah.
That was, yeah, I did keep that number to myself. But, you know, for me, I knew that I didn't want to lose 40 grand again, so I started looking for how I can hedge that while maintaining, you know, the EV that I was generating that I liked.
So moving
did you
beyond
do it with
counting.
a team or what? How did you do that?
Yeah, so at the time I thought was I would join a team. And because when you're counting cards, it's all about getting to the long run, and in the short run, anything can happen. And my thought was, well, if I'm on a team of counters and we agree to combine, you know, suddenly we're playing hundreds of hours a month instead of dozens of hours a month. And we overcome the swings and get to the long run faster. And there was a team that had previously tried to recruit me, and I had really rebuffed them because, again, I'm pretty independent and I was bankrolled. But the manager of that team knew that I'd taken a big hit, and he struck while the iron was hot and was basically said, hey, you know, we're starting a new bankroll. Do you want to come down, get tested out, and, you know, play with us?
And so you did?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I did. And, but I was warned about, so I was willing to join the team, but I was skeptical. Just dealing with large amounts of money. How well do you know these people? Who are they? And can you get stolen from? And it turns out that with this team, they had recently had an incident with a team member who was stealing from them. This was, and I cleared this with my teammates before mentioning it here on the show. But basically what happened was there was a player that didn't have his own bankroll, and suddenly he has a nicely sized chunk of team cash, and he mysteriously has a player's card with a pretty high tier from one of the major chains. And the question is, how did you get that? Oh, and why are you reporting a loss that doesn't make any sense and you always have these major losses? So people were pretty skeptical of what he was doing. And it ended up that they kind of sprung a little trap for him to give him enough rope to hang himself to see if they could verify that he was making up his results. And sure enough, they were able to verify that he was lying and called a team meeting ostensibly to reach out to the bank. They got all the money that he was holding back from him, and they said, hey, we know you're done. You're not getting paid.
So how did they figure this out? Or not how did they figure it out? How did they prove it?
They were skeptical of the results, and they had the data point about the player's card. So one of the things that the team had to do was to report, hey, I'm at this casino, I'm playing with this bet spread, and then within an hour report the results. So he had said that he was taking a trip to a certain very small casino, and he went ahead and mentioned on the team Discord that, hey, I've clocked in, I'm here, I'm playing. And one of the other teammates was at that casino. They have one or two pits, and he was able to verify that, no, he's not in fact playing. And then the guy reports on the team spreadsheet, oh, hey, I lost however many $1,000, when the fact of the matter is that they knew that he didn't even play, or at least didn't play at the casino that he said. And the fact that he lied about that, coupled with the data and the suspicion, was sufficient for them to make the team decision that this wasn't somebody that they wanted to be on a team with anymore.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I can see that. Yeah, those are always such hard situations. I mean, in the old days, back like 40 years ago, it was really common to give people lie detector tests. And it was usually at the beginning of any kind of team, it was understood that any player could request any other player take a lie detector test. I always thought it was really a bad way to go about it because lie detector tests are so unreliable. And in the days of the internet, learning how to beat them is so prevalent. You can look it up in 30 seconds and find out how to beat them. So I'm kind of glad that went the way of the dinosaur, that they aren't using that anymore. But when you do have someone you suspect of cheating, stealing, it's always just so awkward and I don't know. I mean, I always considered the people I played with friends, and then when you realize like they're stealing from you, it's just such an awful feeling. So
yeah.
And
that was one of the things that I was most skeptical of with the very concept of joining a team. But ironically, they disclosed to me that this had happened, and I was impressed with how they handled it. I thought the team manual was good, and they talked about different procedures they were going to put in place to minimize the risk of this happening again. One of them was that everybody has to be invested in the team bankroll. And despite the history, with how they handled it and some of the new procedures that were in place, I was comfortable joining the team, so I went ahead and did.
And how did that go?
It went well. It did go well. It was a positive experience. For me, one of the best things was the camaraderie. I'm an extrovert and I'm a verbal processor. So to be able to talk to someone who not only understands the winning and losing, but is also winning and losing with you. If one of us goes out and has a 5-figure win the team had a 5-figure win. And if one of us just gets destroyed, the team got destroyed. And being able to discuss things candidly and share info and really just vent when we needed to was great, because like I said, family members and friends, even though I maintain those relationships, they just don't get it, when I lost however many $1,000 counting cards. And it's the whole, are you a degenerate? So having that base of people that were really in it with you as teammates, with the grind of card counting, for me was really valuable.
And was your approach just that you were all solo players, playing off a common bank, or did you travel together, make like big player call-in kind of plays, or how was the team structured?
Yeah, so we did do exclusively solo counting. We didn't do any spotter BP or anything like that. We did occasionally travel together, but the team manual specified that we were counters first, and we had to meet our hours commitments. We were welcome to do other things in the AP world, but the team came first and foremost. So that's how
so you were allowed to do other AP? See, I was on teams where, basically the first teams I was involved with, you were not allowed to make plays that were not part of the team. So, so
I should clarify, if anything was on the table side, it needed approval from the team manager. If you're going to form a side team because you have a flasher that you want to play, or if there's a good shuffle, that needed to be discussed. But as far as just the minor machine things that people did, people were welcome to do that on their own, as long as it didn't interfere with counting, whether getting time or, bringing unnecessary heat was how things were structured.
And you mentioned having an hours commitment. How many hours were you guys committed to per week?
Everyone was able to set their own hours commitment. So my hours commitment was 50 hours a month, and that's actual table time. A few other players were 50. I think the lowest was maybe 10 or 15. But the way that our team was structured was, you break the bankroll at a certain AV number, and then people are paid 50% to investors in proportion with their investment. And we didn't have outside investors. It was all us. And then 50% to players in proportion with their EV generated. So there's an incentive to get your hours and play the best games. Otherwise, your compensation is going to suffer as a result.
Well, but how did you calculate your EV?
The team had predefined and pre-approved spreads that we used, different game conditions, and we had a master spreadsheet that we would report the exact game conditions, which spread we used, and the penetration and the rule set, and the spreadsheet would calculate the hourly for that, in addition to rounds per hour. So, if we're playing heads up, there's a lot more rounds per hour, so it's higher EV than if you're at a full table, it's much slower and the game's not worth as much. So it accounted for all those things. We had one guy on our team he's a CPA, and his Excel skills were just out of this world. So we were able to get into this Excel sheet in the cloud. We'd punch everything in, and then everything would auto-populate. The records would be there. It was really impressive.
So when you were on your own, before you joined the team, you were betting 2x500. With the team, I'm assuming you had a larger bankroll. Were you betting more than that?
It varied. We played as high as 2x700 or maybe 2x800, but there were different game conditions that allowed for that. If the penetration on a shoe game wasn't what we wanted it to be, we were topping out at 2x5, but on a deeply dealt game, we might be able to go higher. But we also played a lot of games that were really in low limit places. So 2x2 and 2x3, and we'd just top out early, sometimes even at a true one, going from table min to table max in certain situations.
So with this spreadsheet, you must have played pretty much just like your teammates did. Did you ever get confused for a teammate?
Yeah, this is actually this is a funny story. We didn't travel together all that much, but we did play some of the same games at different times. And there's one casino in a pretty isolated part of the country, and they just don't really see action. It's a locals place and everybody plays red chips. And I remember being on a table one time there, and the dealer asked me, she says, "Oh, so you dyed your hair and you straightened it?" And I'm thinking, what's this lady talking about? I told her I'd never been here. And she said that I hadn't been around in a while. And I said, well, no, I promise you, I've never been to this casino before. And she looks at me and she's like, "Oh, well, you must have a brother from such and such a state." And she mentions this specific state, and I think she's confusing me for one of my teammates. And how is that possible? And she goes on and she says, "You play blackjack the same way as this other guy. You jump from one hand at 25 to three hands at 300, and literally nobody else plays blackjack like that. It's just super weird." And, my teammate and I really don't look that much alike. We might have similar complexion, but, hair color, eye color, height, those things are all different. But then, several weeks later, another one of our teammates, our team manager, went through town, and the same dealer is like, "Oh, haven't seen you for a couple weeks." And he was like, "No, I've never been here before."
All she sees is the bets, not the person making them.
Yeah, that's right. And the fact that we weren't tipping.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned when you first started playing full time that you thought you were doing it while waiting for this job that might come a year down the road. Did you eventually just abandon the idea of the job, or did they ever call? What happened with that?
So technically, I'm still in the hiring process. I haven't
How
let
many
it go,
years later?
but I've just deferred and deferred and deferred, because eventually I got to a point where I realized that I enjoyed advantage play. I enjoyed the freedom and flexibility it provided, and the money wasn't bad. So it was enough to keep me interested. But I'm keeping my doors open. I'm deferring as long as I can. I imagine eventually they're going to be like, well, there's just no way.
How many years have you been playing full time now?
About a year.
Only 1 year?
Yeah, about a year and a half.
Oh, I thought it was much longer than that.
No, not me. I'm still a very new player.
So what happened with the team?
Yeah, eventually the team ended up disbanding. There were some personal challenges for some people, and we also had some challenges on the team where there were people that, might not be coming close to their hours commitments. And, some team members join the team because they're motivated to combine hours. Others have different motivations. And when someone's not pulling their weight, at first it's like, okay, fine, we get it. Life happens and you want to be gracious to people. But then over a period of months, it's like, well, this really isn't sustainable. It's not working, because again, we set our own hours commitments for each bankroll. So nobody forced anybody into anything. But really that wasn't what broke up the team. There were some other things that happened in people's lives, and we eventually came to an agreement. Hey, we're just going to chop this bank early, and we're going to move on.
Well, one of the problems is that as long as you're winning, the motivation to play a lot of hours is there. But if the bankroll gets stuck, your hours become worth less in the long run because you're paid on the number of hours that you've played. And so, everybody on the team thinks like an advantage player. So when the bankroll is stuck, a lot of them don't want to go play because, they're being paid less basically. But when the bankroll is ahead, everybody wants to get a lot of hours in because each hour is going to be worth more at the end when you break it. This is always a problem in designing pay structures on these kind of bankrolls.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. I think, though, a lot of us, had a mindset that we want to go out there and get those hours because we don't break the bank unless we get the hours. So regardless of individual pay, we all need to get there to get the bank broken, and we wanted just to slog through it. And when it really got stuck was when we weren't winning, but also people weren't playing. So there was just no forward motion, and that did cause some challenges that we had to work through together.
We also tried building in penalties for not meeting your hours requirements. So I remember on one particular team, if for every hour that you did not play that you had committed to play, you got a negative hour when it came time to break the bank. We played with lots of different structures to try to get people to meet their hours requirements. But I remember one friend in particular who was really not very motivated, and he had a lot of money, so he would end up losing money on a bank because he had so many negative hours compared to what he had actually played.
Oh wow. Yeah, I think with us, at least the intent was, well, people's compensation is married to how much they play proportionally, that would be incentive. But it makes sense that we never thought of building in a negative incentive like that. Like, hey, if you don't meet it, there is a penalty. And I think that, who knows, maybe things would have been different had it been structured like that.
Under the right conditions, do you see yourself joining another team in the future?
I don't know that I see myself joining a long-term team. I think for me, teams like this anyway have the most appeal in the card counting world. And at this point, I am no longer counting cards. But there are other things in the AP world that are very difficult to do alone. So there is value in being on a team in those contexts.
Yeah, and I mean, the way for the last number of years when I was involved in plays, the team basically would chop it at the end of the trip. There was no long-term bankroll. It's like, okay, we're going to go to this location. We're going to be there for a week, and at the end of the week, we chop it up, win or lose.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, and I have been involved in a few things like that, but in terms of a long-term team, I don't expect that I would join another long-term team, but I also don't like to limit myself. If the right opportunity came along, I'd certainly look at it.
Well, how about a right opportunity to take a commercial break? Please look at that. The South Point has more than 10,000 games, returning more than 99%. This is more than anyone else has. In April, the promotion is the $500,000 guaranteed Money Madness promotion. 2 casino-wide progressives are running at all times. The larger begins at $10,000 and must be hit by $25,000. The smaller begins at $1,000 and must be hit by $2,500. The smaller one is geared to hit 3 times a day. All active players who have played at least $1 in the previous 60 seconds with their card inserted are eligible to win. When the big progressive goes off, if you're not the winner, you will receive $25 in free play. There are more food options at the South Point now. Baja Miguel's, primarily prime rib, and the bar in their vicinity are now open Thursdays. In addition to the Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, they've been open since reopening. Beginning May 1st, it's expected that these outlets will also be open on Wednesdays. At predicted.org, there's a market where you can place small bets on the occurrence of various political events, mostly but not entirely in the United States. Our listeners receive a one-time offer of a deposit match up to $20 at predicted.org/promo/edge. You must play the money through once and cannot withdraw it for 30 days. BlackjackApprenticeship.com is an excellent site for those of you who wish to be successful at counting cards at blackjack. They have boot camps. There are currently some scheduled but not announced as to the exact dates. If you're interested in the boot camp, contact Colin Jones at colin@blackjackapprenticeship.com. Videopoker.com is the best place to play lots of games. If you sign up for the gold membership, $8.95 a month or $79.95 a year, this allows you to get correction on most of the games. The game of the week is Magic Deal Poker. This is a 10 coins per line game where periodically, prior to the deal, you receive 1, 2, or 3 magic deal cards. They're like wild cards, except they're determined after all of the other cards are dealt, and they must take a value of a real card, which means you cannot have 5 of a kind in a game like Double Double Bonus. The frequency of magic deal cards depends on the game. On game where 2 pair receive even money, you get relatively few magic deal cards. On game where 2 pair pays double money, you get significantly more magic deal cards. All right, we are back talking to MPS.
So, go ahead, Bob.
What would you say your fondest memories are from counting?
There's one trip in particular that really sticks out to me. I was in a particular market literally the day it opened after the lockdowns, and they had a great promotion running that I wanted to play. And I was playing rated. I was overrated by a ridiculous margin, which benefited me. But there was kind of an unbelievable procedural flaw that didn't last very long. It was a double deck game, and after each shoe ended, they would spread the cards on the table in 3 rows, and they started face down, and they would put a wand over them, like a virus-killing kind of sanitizing wand. And then they would turn all the cards face up and right on the table where everybody can see them and run the wand over them for, 10 or 15 seconds. And then they'd scoop them. They didn't wash the cards after doing this, and they did face up seconds. So they'd scoop them and do a weak shuffle. So there was a lot of information that became available from this virus killing procedure. And it was a lot of fun. Obviously that didn't last, but I've never had an opportunity like that since, and I don't know that I will again. And that was a lot of fun for the couple hours it was there.
Back in the old days, there were casinos that when a game was a dead spread, they would spread the cards face up on the table. And yeah, you could just walk up to the table and look at the cards spread. And then back then the shuffles were all pretty simple. And you could just cut your section to the front, play it, and then walk away, and then often go back to the same table because the cards that had been played were at the bottom of the discard rack. They would take the cards out of the shoe, put them on top, and now take the whole thing and turn it face up and spread it. So your same chunk of cards would be there. There were a lot of fun opportunities back in the old days for those kinds of things.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And then by the way, the cage literally ran out of money that day. Like they couldn't cash chips. And the next day, that part of the game is gone, but it's still a pretty strong game, but I couldn't get a seat. There were a limited number of seats, and I waited till evening to get a seat. And I sit down with this guy that's dressed up like Billy the Kid. I mean, he's got a bandana up to his eyes. He's wearing gloves. He just looks ridiculous, but you can't see who he is, taking full advantage of the, you can wear a mask. Because at this point, masks were not normal or required, so that there was no mask requirement in this particular market when it opened. But yeah, so I get a seat, and the first thing we do is we try to raise the table maximum. And the floor looks at me and she says, "Oh, sorry, honey, surveillance has gone home for the night, and we can't raise the limits unless we have someone watching the cameras." And this is interesting, right? And then we're still chatting with her, really nice lady, but just oblivious. And she's like, "Hey, this is my first day on the floor by myself. I had 1 day of training, and that was months ago before the lockdowns. So I just don't know what I'm doing." So open season. Absolutely open season. There were just 2 of us on the table. And between us, even though we couldn't get the max higher, we ran well. And we took 20 grand off the table. And as it turned out, he was an advantage player as well. I didn't know this at the time. So we just obliterate this game. And, when it's time for the pit to close, this guy pushes a CTR stack of chips toward the dealer to color up, more than 10 grand worth of chips. And the dealer, who was also we knew was very weak, just picks up his chips and puts them in the rack.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and the guy's like, whoa, we're trying to color up here. What's going on? And, the casino manager had gone home by this point. It's, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 a.m. The tables are closing. And this poor lady in the pit, it's her first day, so she doesn't know what to do. There's nobody in surveillance. And so she says, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull up the cameras here in the pit. Why don't you just come in here to the pit with me and look at the computer and, we'll count the chips together and see how much we need to give you. And I'm sitting here on the table like, is this real? Is this guy literally going to walk in the pit and pull up the cameras? And sure enough, they're there. Oh, this looks like it's 5 chips or 7 chips in that stack.
Oh, and, no, it must be at least 9.
Right. And sure enough, they work it out. They come to how many chips they think the guy has. And we took, between the two of us, I think north of 20 grand off that table with a pretty low max. It was a special situation, and we happened to run hot. So that was a lot of fun.
Have you had any bad back-offs or 86ings?
No, not really. I've been able to avoid the back room, and the Vegas back-offs are easy. One particularly funny one that I remember was I was just getting destroyed at a particular property, and people were noticing how bad it was. And the floor comes over to me and says, all right, it's over. And I'm like, all right, thank goodness, we're done with this. And we shared a good laugh. But, there was one, this wasn't a back off or a barring per se, but it could have gotten a little bit dicey. In the Southwest, I showed up for a session not knowing the casino was about to close. And I got to play for 15, 20 minutes, and I was playing big. Topping out, I think, 2x700, and again, just happened to run hot, and took several grand in chips off the table. And there's some attention that's, building up in the floor, and I can tell that something is about to happen. So it's time to go. And the casino's closing, and this was during COVID, and during COVID, there are limited means of entry and egress, so everybody's bottlenecking, trying to get out. And I've got this security officer behind me saying, excuse me, sir, I need to see your ID. And I have no interest in talking to this guy, but I'm trying to move through just a mass of people. And people were like, oh, hey, the nice security man is trying to talk to you. And I was like, nope, trying to get out of here. And eventually I make it to the parking lot, and I see that, no one's following me anymore. This is fine. And I had chosen to park kind of in a side lot, and I was the only car in the side lot as opposed to the main lot. And I get into my car, and I see out of the corner of my eye some, I don't know if they were tribal police officers or security guards, but they're dragging steel barricades. And I'm like, oh, why are these guys dragging barricades? And then it occurs to me that they're dragging the barricades towards the one exit to the parking lot, which was, a moment of realization like, oh, wow, they're trying to block me in here. Fortunately enough, I was able to quickly exit without causing any risk of injury to myself or those guys. I got to the exit first, and I got the hell out of there and never went back.
How'd you get rid of your chips?
One of my teammates was coming into town the next day, so I was able to offload those to her, and she was able to play there a little bit and to cash them.
Oh, so you had a female teammate?
Yeah, we did. We were a co-ed team. Very
cool. Yeah. That's pretty rare, I think.
Yeah. How has being an AP changed how you look at cash?
I never carried cash on me before Advantage Play. I got a credit card when I was 18, and it was convenient to use that for expenses and just to pay it off every month, so you don't have the physical bills and the change. And, if it's lost, it's much easier to fix than it is with cash. But I remember one time, 5 or 6 years ago, I was buying a property, and for whatever reason, in order to get the EMD done, I needed to pull $5 grand in cash out of a bank and literally walk it across the street. Maybe five lanes of traffic in suburban USA. I don't think I'd ever had $1,000 in cash on me. And I remember pulling that $5 grand out, clutching it with all my might, looking to cross the street both ways, 3 or 4 times, because it would have been a bad time to get hit by a bus, and just being awestruck by the fact that, wow, I've got $5,000 in my hand. And, fast forward however many years I'm doing this, and $5,000 in my pocket is a slow day. It's just a completely different perspective.
Did you ever work out when would be a good time to be hit by a bus?
I have not worked that one out yet.
So how much are you on the road now?
Pretty much full time. I'm not moving as much as I did when I was counting, because some of the ways that I'm earning now have more longevity. So I'll go and play a game as long as it's good, and I will move on. But I am still doing the road warrior lifestyle to an extent.
Have you had trouble cashing out?
Yeah, there was one particular incident that comes immediately to mind on the East Coast, and this was very early. This was, I think it might have been before I'd actually been tested out. I just started playing in the United States, and I got some heat in the pit and made the rookie mistake that Richard constantly advises people not to make, and I went straight to the cage to cash out. Not a good choice. And so I presented a few grand in purple, and they pulled them into the cage and said, "Sir, can we see your ID?" And I said, "Oh, no, thank you. Can you just return my chips?" And they said, "No, we can't give you back your chips." And they hedged it in terms of age verification. This was not a tribal casino. This was a commercial casino, and they refused to return my chips. So this was frustrating, and I called gaming in that particular state, and gaming's a unit of the state police there. And I said, "Hey, I'm at such and such. I went to cash out, and they confiscated my chips because I wouldn't show ID." And the gaming agent told me that they were within their rights to confiscate my chips, and that they were expressly given the right to do that by the state's lottery regulation. And I remember thinking, oh, a lottery regulation, that's got to be a public document. I said, "Can you point to me where in writing the casino is authorized to take my chips?" And she says that she can't do it with a subpoena, which is ridiculous. If it's a lottery regulation, it's a public document. But I was just getting nowhere. I was getting nowhere with her. So this was in the evening, maybe 7 or 8 p.m. So the next morning, I went down to the state gaming office in town, kind of to plead my case. And the trooper that was there called the trooper I spoke with the night prior and had her on speakerphone in the other room, and I could hear her tell him, "No, he can't have his chips. He absolutely has to show ID. The casino's within their rights." And this was $2,000, so it's enough to be frustrating, but it's absolutely not enough to litigate over. But I'm a stubborn person. I didn't want to actually give them my identity. And to this day, I can't believe this worked, but I worked out a bit of a crafty solution. So I went back to the casino, and I was recognized at the cage, and I was really polite. And I just said, "Hey, you remember me, my chips were in here yesterday, and you wanted my ID for age verification." And they're like, "Yeah, that's right." And I said, "So, just to be clear, this is all about age verification. There's nothing else. So really all you need is, my ID with the picture on it and to see my date of birth." And they said, "Yes, and we need to know it's a valid ID as well." So I pulled my passport out of my pocket, and I pressed it up against the glass on the cage so they couldn't grab it. And there was duct tape covering everything except my picture, my date of birth, and the expiration. And she rolled her eyes so hard that she could see her brain, but it worked. They gave me my chips. They never got my name. They verified my age, and I was able to walk away.
Wow. I bet that wouldn't work more than, 1 out of 50 or something. I mean,
to this day, I can't believe that I got away with it. But, looking back at the time, I was convinced that, oh, this is heat. Oh, this is heat. And I found out later that a nearby casino had gotten into a significant amount of trouble with the gaming authorities for rampant underage gambling. And everybody was cracking down. So at the time, I was convinced it was heat. I'm a new card counter. Everything's about me. The phone rings. It's about me. And in hindsight, I don't think that was true. I think it was an age verification. I don't think the pit was talking to the cage. And Yeah, but the moral of the story is absolutely don't go to the cage after you play. That whole situation could have been avoided had I done that.
Can you share with us how easy it is to get duct tape off of passports?
It wasn't hard at all, honestly.
Yeah,
it just came
the
right off.
pages are laminated, sort of. They're slick.
Yeah, laminate. That's right.
Have you ever gotten in any fights in casinos?
Yeah, I was in St. Louis one time playing, and in the high limit rooms in that area are like $25 games, and it's the last round of the shoe, and I've got a quarter out there, and the other guy on the table is rather large and rather drunk, and he's betting chunky black. He gets 2 pat hands. I've got a 12, and the dealer's got a 2. We know that basic strategy is to hit a 12 against a 2. So I hit, and I took the dealer's bus card and got a 10. And the guy starts yelling at me even before the round is resolved. You suck at blackjack. You suck at blackjack. And go figure what happens. The dealer flips a 10, draws a 9 for 21, and both of his pat hands lose. And he just starts yelling at me and eventually walks away. And right after that happened, I got countermeasured, and people were looking at us, and so they're cutting the shoe in half and changing the table limits. And I said to the manager, I said, "Are you doing that because I suck at blackjack?" Because I thought that was funny. And the manager did not think that was funny. So I ended up, leaving this particular casino and walking out to my car, and just dumb luck, here's the guy parked very close to me. And he saw me in the parking lot, and he was ready to throw down and fight. So I was able to physically avoid that. And, one of the women he was with, pulled him back and got him into the vehicle. So no fights, but that was the one time where we came a little close.
Did you ever get paid with small bills?
Yeah. So I was up in the Pacific Northwest one time, and I finished my trip with maybe $4,000 in chips. And this particular casino didn't have any purple or anything above black. So I had 40 black chips, and I went over to the cage, and I can still see the cashier look at me saying, "Oh, we're so sorry. We don't have any more $100 bills. We've only got 20s. But she says, "But, we're getting a delivery. If you come back in an hour, I'll be able to pay you in hundreds and make it a little bit easier." So, I wasn't in a hurry. I said, "Yeah, no problem." Went, had some lunch, and I killed an hour. And I went back into the casino and saw the same cashier. And as I'm walking up to her, she's giving me this, "Oh, I'm so sorry" look. And I figure, no problem. And I say, "I can do 20s. It's not an issue." And she said, "Well, no, we haven't gotten the delivery yet, but actually we're out of 20s now too."
Oh, geez.
So I got paid in $410 bills.
Wow.
Yeah. I still have a picture of the felt when I bought in with them at the next place. And it looks unusual to buy in for a substantial amount of money in $10 bills.
In Vegas, there's a casino there's a casino chain called Dottie's, where there are 15 machine outlets, and sometimes you get paid in $5 bills. So this was happening to me regularly. And so at other casinos, I would go in and I would be a known player, and I would take a stack of $800 or so in $5 bills and ask if they could change them. Sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes the answer is no, or they can take a certain number of them. Otherwise, I would just put them into the machine, hit the cash out button when I had the hundreds. It would take a while, but could do it.
Yeah, nowadays you can get arrested for that because they think you're money laundering.
Not known players who are not known big players.
Right. Yeah.
And so, which I was. If you had it to do over again, is there anything in your AP career you would have done differently?
There are several things, but I think the one that jumps out the most to me was protecting my identity better. Apart from the time where I pulled that one trick with the passport, I was relatively, frankly, careless. in the very beginning with my ID. You know, my passport gets scanned on the way to enter the casino, and I already drove here. I don't want to leave. I want to earn money so I sit down and play. And as a result of not protecting my identity or, you know, waiting till I can get in without being carded, I was databased very early. Actually, my first back off in the U.S., I found out later, got me into one of the databases, and that has hurt me now that I'm doing other things. It's still possible to make money, but if I could do it again, or even now, if I could pay a large sum of money to wipe out my database entries, I'd do it without thinking about it.
Well, but you could get a legal name change, right? I mean, they'd still have your picture, but they wouldn't have your name.
Yeah, people talk about that. I don't know that I'm to the point where I consider changing my name, and even if I did change my name, I don't know that I could change my social security number, which
No,
for
yeah,
some of the things that I do is it's tied to the social, but that is maybe an option for down the line. We'll see.
So have you had a problem, say, I mean, we're talking about like a W-2G if they want your social, right? So
Right.
Have you had a problem where because you gave up your name and social, it linked to an old blackjack play and caused you heat? Or
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yes. I've never been refused payment on a W2G, and for me, if I'm trespassed somewhere, I don't go back. But it has brought me attention that I don't want.
Sure.
All right. Thank you, MPS. This has been an enjoyable session. We wish you continued good luck. At the end of our show, we have a recommended section, which usually means Richard, always means Richard, occasionally me, and sometimes our guest. So, Richard, do you have a recommended for us today?
You know what? I don't, because I've been looking for something on Netflix to the shows that I've been watching on Netflix have not been that great recently, so I don't want to recommend them. so maybe if somebody has something good to watch, they can send it to me. Well,
I'm actually grateful for your previous recommendations on Netflix. So I'm several episodes behind you, but I have found them useful. For me, a week and a half ago, as this goes on the air, there was a meeting of people who normally would go to the Blackjack Ball, a Zoom meeting. So we came from all over the world. And James Grosjean gave his report of what conditions are out in the blackjack world. And he posted them on the gamblingwithanedge.com forum. So those he's a very popular author. Most of our listeners would like to know what he has to say. So it's at gamblingwithanedge.com.
And we'll put a link to it in the show notes. So
MPS, do you have anything you want to share with us?
Yeah, I do have a recommended. My recommended is skiplagged.com, which is a search engine for cheap flights. And what makes them different is a method they call hidden city ticketing. And what that means is sometimes it's cheaper to book a ticket with a final destination on the ticket that's not your intended destination, just the way the algorithms work for the airline. So say we're in Vegas and we need to fly to Chicago. Sometimes it's cheaper to buy a ticket that ends in Detroit with a layover in Chicago, even though the first leg is the same as what could be purchased standalone. The way the algorithms work, it's cheaper. And Skiplagged helps identify those opportunities. And as long as you don't check a bag, and it works well.
But now you can't buy a round trip, right? Because
correct.
So
correct.
And the airlines hate when you do this, but yeah, but it will save you a lot of money.
Yeah, the United actually sued Skiplagged a few years ago, saying that they couldn't do that, and Skiplagged won the lawsuit against United. So the airlines don't like it, but you absolutely can do it.
Do the travelers who take advantage of this get on some kind of airline shit list and not be able to buy tickets in the future?
I've never experienced that. I've heard stories of people who linked it to a frequent flyer account and lost their points. So I personally never use a frequent flyer account if it's a better deal for me to do this. So there is some risk involved, but I don't think it's substantial at all.
And how much does Skiplag charge for this?
Yeah, so recently they added this on that they've started taking a fee if you book through them. And the way to avoid the fee is to use Skiplagged to find the ticket and then just book directly through the airline, and you don't need to pay their 3 or 5% or whatever it is.
Uh-huh. Very good. So I could just see asking them to be a sponsor and then telling our crowd to avoid paying the fee by direct voting.
Yeah, that'd work well.
That sounds like a good strategy.
I'm sure they'd love it.
All right. Thank you, MPS. It's been fun. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Richard. Go out and hit lots of royal flushes, everybody. Good day.